Hey everyone, my name is Jessica and I wanted to do a quick live video today on a topic that I like to call moving from savior to sovereign. And then another way to say this could be moving out of codependency. I don't really like that word because it's overused and it comes with a ton of negative connotations that are kind of linked to addiction work. And while that's true, that can definitely be a part of it. I like to think of moving from savior to sovereign as a more relatable way to say what most of us are or have experienced before. And it actually is more common than you think. If you don't think that you have codependent traits, or that you've acted as a savior, or like a better way to say that could be the archetype of the hero, then you might be mistaken, because most people have on some level, because we live in a society where we do depend on each other. We are born to be codependent. We are. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's when it gets out of balance that it can be destructive in our relationships, and it can also sabotage us from moving into our highest form of showing up and being present to our life and to ourselves. So as you probably have heard that word sovereign, it's kind of like a keyword or a buzzword right now. What that means to me, the word sovereign, it means to me that it's full responsibility to have personal authority over my choices, my energy, my mood, and my decisions, all of that, that I have full control over my response to my external world. Doesn't mean that I control my external world, but I have full control over how I respond, and I have full control over the energy that I put out as well as let in to my world. And so when things go awry, or I get pulled into unhealthy attachment styles, neediness, also known as codependency, anything like that, if I get pulled into that, then ultimately I actually have to start taking responsibility for my choices and the energy that I have been letting into my life, instead of falling into the victim and playing that out, which I'm sure if you guys have heard of the victim, villain, hero triangle, you know, it's like the drama triangle. If you can imagine that, a lot of us subconsciously fall into the victim and blame the quote villain of our lives. That could play out in lots of different ways. But ultimately, moving into sovereignty is getting out of victim. It's saying, I am not a victim of life. Things happen to me that are out of my control, yes, but ultimately I will not allow myself to fall into victim mentality. And so moving from savior to sovereign is really, really important. And it's not something that just happens overnight. It really isn't. It's something that we have to work on every single day. And if you're like me, which I think a lot of people that I'm connected with on this platform, this Facebook platform are, I come from a religious background. So this isn't dogging religion at all, but it is something that I personally experienced in religion, where I was not fully acting in my own personal responsibility for what I believed and what I thought, and therefore was on some level was part of being taken advantage of as far as power dynamics go. So that's a whole nother video that I don't think I should get into right now, but another thing that's showing up for a lot of us right now is abuse of power. And that can look like sexuality, it could look like gurus, it could look like anything or person outside of us that we give our power away to, and we give control or more of an influence over our decisions and our thoughts than our own intuition. It's any time that gets out of balance for us is when we've given our power away and we have fallen into being a victim of abuse of power. So if you're like me, like I was saying, if you're like me and you have a patterned imprint of growing up in religion or any kind of dogmatic system that could even just be very patriarchal system, which we all have grown up in on some level, then you might have this blind spot, or you might have this shadow aspect or blind spot that you don't even recognize is playing out in relationships, where you're playing out being the victim or giving your power away in some way. And also, being a victim means that you're in codependency. It means that you have not fully taken full responsibility for your life. And that's kind of a hard pill to swallow. It can be. And so this is a lifelong commitment. It's something that I find is more common than not. As I work with people either in my groups or in individual therapy, nobody wants to really admit that they haven't taken full responsibility for their life. Nobody likes to really admit that. It's a lot easier to come in and talk about what's happened to us and why we are the way we are, instead of future looking and starting to create a new story based on what we want versus what's happened to us. So it's, I just, to really buffer this topic a little bit with compassion, with non-judgment, and not shame is also really important. So we definitely don't want to bring any of that into this topic either. So if you resonate, if you're looking for a more non-traditional approach to mental health, that is what Yothera is. I've been a mental health therapist for 10 years, a licensed clinical social worker. I'm also a Phoenix Rising yoga therapist. I'm also a yoga teacher as well, a Reiki practitioner, and I also do breath work. So I really bridge both Eastern and Western approaches to mental health. So if you've been looking for therapy, but maybe you're wanting something more than talk therapy or more traditional approaches, I do that, but I also bring more into the work. My groups are also very popular. I really love doing them. It's really fun for me. I love doing groups. The groups also can provide CEUs for therapists if you're wanting them. But the groups are for anyone. The groups are for anyone that wants to go deeper in a group setting with psychology and embodiment. So they're really, really awesome for that and connection. And I really find that this time of year, people are wanting to connect on a deeper level. So if this is calling to you, if my energy is resonating, or if these videos are resonating, just kind of take that as your intuition. Sometimes intuition doesn't make sense. I've noticed that with myself. Logic is important, but it's also really important to notice when we're drawn to someone or something and we're not quite sure why, but we just know there's a resonance. And if you're feeling that, I've definitely been feeling that with certain people in my life. And that's part of learning how to trust ourselves. That's been really important in my process, is if I know I need to be connecting with someone and I don't really know why yet, usually when I follow that, something way bigger than I could ever have imagined has emerged from that connection. So that's how I tend to be somebody that kind of goes after that and follows, what makes me excited. What's like, oh yeah, like I want more of that. That makes me excited. So I usually follow that. If that's how you operate as well, I would encourage you to start trusting that, because that is intuition. Anything that brings you joy and excitement, a sense of play, a sense of curiosity. I think curiosity is the biggest one. That's something definitely to follow and start trusting that again, which is also part of moving into sovereignty. Starting to really trust your gut and your feelings and what brings you joy and excitement and ease. So that's another thing to point out as well, is codependency or savior is oftentimes fear-based. So it can be a fearful or anxiety state. That is not intuition. If you're worrying and fretting and being in fear over someone or something, or usually that's not your intuition guiding you, that's trauma. Or that's your, I guess for lack of a better word, that is a trauma response. Not to say we shouldn't listen to that, because we do need to acknowledge and be with those emotions, but just notice that you don't want to act when you're in that state of fear. You don't want to act from a state of anxiety, because that's not intuition. So just know that. I'm going to do a whole nother video on how to kind of know the difference. But as we're talking about moving from savior to sovereign, that's really, really important to know what the intention behind your action really is. Is it from fear or anxiety or fear of not belonging? Or is this from a place of true alignment, true peace and joy and love? And that is what is really brave when you start looking at that, when you're willing to take full responsibility for your choices. So I hope this was helpful. The link to my groups are part of this. I put the link in the description. And also my newsletter, if you're interested, so you don't have to depend on just social media to get updates. I'm actually in the middle of planning a weekend retreat here in Boise at New Moon Healing Center. So excited. I don't know when it's going to be yet, but I'm thinking November. I'm getting the dates all squared away, but we have such an awesome community that's coming together there. I just finished a couple interviews this morning with some really awesome practitioners that are wanting to do groups. And then also maybe there's one that might even be a permanent practitioner there. So I'm so excited. So many really cool things happening. And so yeah, it's a great space to come and do some groups and connect with community. And again, if you're looking for individual therapy, but you're wanting more of a holistic approach, check out my website. And I'd love, or you can direct message me and let me know if you have any questions. I hope you have an awesome weekend and enjoy this beautiful fall weather. I'm loving it. So thanks, everybody.